said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Global warming. It's a hoax. Don't believe any of it. It's those crazy liberals trying to advance their agenda, their propaganda. Don't believe it. Polar ice caps melting, sea levels rising. They just make that up. It's not really helping. Those pictures that you see of Beijing and Shanghai with that really thick gray clouds and people are wearing masks, those are doctored up. That's all Photoshop. That's not right. It doesn't really happen that way. The feeling that the winters are getting less and less snowy and warmer, it's just your imagination. Relax. Everything's okay. Oh yeah, and fracking. And those earthquakes that they've been having in Oklahoma? Not real. Not real at all. We can look at it that way. We can look at this passage in Revelation as an excuse not to care, because really we don't have to. See, if all these things are real, if there really are earthquakes happening because of fracking, and if the temperature is rising and the ice caps are melting and the sea levels are rising and all these things are happening, it doesn't matter. Because God is going to give us a new heaven and a new earth, so we can mess up whatever we want to. It's all going to be okay. Don't worry about it. I hope that helps you all sleep better. This passage becomes such an excuse to do whatever the heck we want with creation. To one another, to the created order, because we have this feeling that everything in the end is still going to be okay, because John saw before him a new heaven and a new earth. The old had passed away, everything was made new, there's no more crying, there's no more pain, there's no more sorrow, all tears are wiped away by the hand of God, and everything's hunky-dory. So we just don't have to worry about these things. But that is the very excuse that we tell ourselves, not only in how we treat creation, but in how we treat one another. And we get lost and caught up in this apocalyptic idea that God is going to break in any second now and make it all better. Okay, so what if God is going to come in and make it all better, but what do we do in the meantime? And what if God is using us to make everything better, but yet we're sitting on our hands and doing nothing while we wait for God to do all the work? We have to do it. You see, this passage, this entire book of Revelation, it's really my least favorite in the Bible. I don't hate it. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. But just, I think, because it's used as such an excuse, and it's not just me. The early church didn't accept the book of Revelation, the scripture. It didn't make the cut in the beginning. The church fathers, the powers that be, said, no, this is too weird, this apocalyptic weird vision. I think John was smoking some peyote or something when he wrote all this. Perhaps he was. But as Marcus Borg says, it's a beautiful way to end the Bible. It's not chronological, it's not the last book that was written, but it's beautiful in this vision of a new heaven and a new earth and a place where everything can really be said that it's okay. But then we have to consider, how in the heck do we make this a reality? Well, Jesus told us how to make it a reality. If you love one another, then they will know that you are my disciples. Well, what does this love look like? In this short little passage in 4 or 5 verses, just saying, treat each other well, love one another, here's your new commandment, everybody's going to know that you're my disciples, the end. But as usual, we're cutting out a short passage from a larger context. And so when we don't read the verses before, we kind of lose the context. The passages before this had Jesus with John and all the other disciples, including Judas, at the Last Supper. Okay? Matthew, Mark, and Luke have this scene of breaking bread, right? This is my body broken for you, etc., etc. In the book of John, that doesn't happen. In the book of John, you have foot washing. So Jesus puts on the cloth and kneels down and gets ready, and Peter says, "Oh, you're Jesus, I'm not going to let you wash my feet." And he's like, "Hey, unless I do this, you're not going to understand anything, and you can't be gathered up into my kingdom." And so Jesus goes and he washes all the feet of all the disciples, including Judas. The passage does not say he washed all the disciples' feet except Judas. No, he washed all their feet. Even knowing what Judas was about to do minutes later, he washed all of their feet as an act of love. Certainly he didn't agree with what Judas was about to do. Certainly he had consternation about it. Maybe he even regretted ever making Judas one of his disciples. But nonetheless, Jesus knelt down and washed his dirty, smelly, dusty, grimy feet because he loved him, despite himself. Judas, in this passage, it's very interesting because Jesus says, one of you is going to betray me. Right? As they gather at the table afterward, he said, the one that I hand this piece of bread to is the one who's going to betray me. So Jesus takes the bread and he hands it to Judas. And it says in the passage something we always miss. When Jesus handed him the bread, Satan entered Judas. Wait a minute. Was Judas not bad before? He wasn't already planning all this? Did Jesus somehow put Judas up to this? Did God make Judas commit this act? We don't know. We don't really know what John is saying there, that Satan entered him at that point. But what matters is that Jesus, no matter what Judas had on his mind, no matter what his intentions were, no matter why he was doing the bad things that he was doing, Jesus loved him, even though he didn't agree with him. And that is the beauty of the story. So when Jesus tells his disciples, if you love one another as I have loved you, he's saying, even if you don't agree with one another, even if you have days where you feel like you utterly loathe one another, if you yet love one another, then this idea of a new heaven and a new earth can be possible. If you love one another, it will know that you are my disciples. We have this mentality because of this passage in Revelation that we all get a do-over. Right? If I don't spend enough time with my kids or my family, or if I treat people a little more harshly than I should, if I don't work as hard as I should, if I kind of just sit back and let other people take care of things, it's okay. It's okay because I get a do-over. All this is going to be wiped out, and I'm going to go to a better place, and I'm going to play the harp with the rest of the angels, and everything's going to be okay. And I don't mean to be a smile. But we make this an excuse, right? There's nothing wrong with the beautiful vision of a better place. I love it. It's wonderful. But it doesn't happen just like that. It happens through labor of love. The hard work of loving people that we would much rather hate. In that passage that was read in Acts, when God says, look at all of those people and do not see any difference in them. We all have our differences. We all have our different beliefs. We all have our different ideas. But if that's what we focus on, then there's so much divisiveness that we can't work together with the vision of God to make this earth right here into heaven, into the kingdom that God envisioned. But it takes work. It takes a whole heck of a lot of love. But when people see us doing these things, they're going to realize that we are Jesus' disciples. We are disciples of somebody who came to this earth and taught human beings that there was a better way. That things as they are didn't have to remain as they are. That things could be better if people would dare greatly, if people would believe. And that is where the key is, that we have to believe. I'm not talking about dogma. I'm not talking about intellectual belief. I'm talking about the belief that is inside of every one of us that things can be better, that things are possible, that if we work together in love and in charity and in hope, and if we teach our children what it means to love and to respect and to have compassion, that we believe, all of us, even people that we think are the most violent criminals, deep down inside of them somewhere, there is a belief that these things are possible. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's so scary people just rebel against it and be as bad as they possibly can just to shut it out. But we have to keep the conversation going. We have to change the conversation from one that says this is all going to pass away, so it doesn't matter, to one that says we believe that we, together, through love, can make this earth a better place for ourselves, for our children. Keep believing. Keep talking about it. And most of all,